Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase live stream. I hope you're all doing well today. If you wouldn't mind giving me a quick just thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat about sound. We unfortunately we're missing our producer today, so I just want to make sure everything's going okay and looking somewhat in focus and all the usual stuff there. And this is cool. I'm now seeing that with StreamYard, this is apparently a feature of theirs. Is that when you go live, they just erase previous comments. So that's awesome. Anyway, I did see Brian Price is with us here. Saw Mike Beam. Mark Monfield's in the house from Minneapolis. And I guess, I don't know, maybe you have to start the whole chat thing a little bit earlier here. No, here we go. Hey, sounds good. And we've got Dr. B joining us from Capitola. Welcome, everyone. All right, so if you would, please post in the chats to @ComicBase TV on YouTube. Anything you'd like me to address on the show, questions about ComicBase, comics, what have you. I will hit as many of those as I can. Might be a little bit of a short show tonight because I'm wrapping up some topics here, and honestly, I've got my up to my elbows in various other works in progress here. So if we don't have a lot that's super interesting, I'm just going to cut it short, and we'll give everyone their time back. And what the heck? So, all right, but anyway, let's get down to it. First of all, some brief comic-based news. We're up to build 1964, I believe. It might be even 1967 now. So we're out of the 20s. We've progressed all the way past World War II in terms of years. But anyway, no, the new builds have a bunch of very small feature requests from folks built into it. There's a request that when you delete a picture, when you delete an item out of the grid, it also delete any existing pictures, or at least prompt you to do that. It now does that. There are some people who've been playing around with the new status bar and figured out that if you do quick changes, which affect the values and things like that, without changing the selection in any way, it wouldn't update the values there, and it now does. And a couple little things like that. So we're happy to, imagine knock those out. Of note too, at least it's a little obscure, but I feel a little weird about it, is the ComicBase database manager. If you've ever used that one to hunt for your old databases, we found out in at least one place that it was, it kind of gives you a list of how many comics are in your database, so what, which, if you're ever lost with your database, you're looking for the right one. It turns out there was one way that was calculating value of collections, because in addition to the number of comics, it also tells you the value of the books in there. In that the database manager was doing the value calculations in a way which is not the best. So we've updated that, and if you care, that's now working now. So anyway, dumb stuff like that, but a bunch of it. If you like following all the little bits of pieces that we do from daily, updates and everything, by all means, go ahead and download that. You can do that under the registrations at www.comicbase.com. Or if you go in your ComicBase preferences and set the preference to under updates to always also include interim updates, then you can get a little easier. Just say internet check for updates then, because it will show you all those builds as well. All right, so other than that, I've been busy with a lot of things that aren't ComicBase. It turns out over here, guys, we don't just write software. We write a whole ecosystem of stuff. There's everything from things on the back end which process your reports when you save them to the web. There are things that sum up totals across people's collections and make sure that they're posted so you can get to them on the mobile app. There's the mobile app itself, which I've been spending a fair amount of time with. There's a bit of a saga going on here with the iOS version, and honestly, I'm not going to get into it right now because I'm hoping to have better news on that one by next week. But the Android version, we went through a little bit of a frou-frou to make the dark mode work a little better. We went at it in a different manner, and we somehow fell afoul of Android's publishing scheme. It may be fixed as we do this right now. You'll be looking for version 3.0.2 if we are, but that's another thing that was happening way too close to showtime for me to say. I'm going to say, if you haven't downloaded the ComicBase app in the last couple of days or so, hold off just until we know that we've got it perfectly right. But anyway, the new version, if you are using it though, should do a better job of dealing with dark mode on Android. It shows you your number of comics in stock and the the condition they're in for any, as you're browsing lists for any people who don't, it no longer, shows that one list in white, even though everything else is black. We're starting to give the thing a bit of polish. One thing that's also behind some of that is moving the Android development more in-house. There is actually, as it turns out, jobs that Americans, or at least this particular American company, don't do, in that increasingly it's actually a lot of American companies is farming out the mobile development to third parties, because it's a very specialized set of skills, and it does not. It's one of those things where, like, if you do a lot of them, you can make it efficient and it's worth your time. And if you don't, the cost as a developer to dip in and out of the mobile development ecosystem is so huge in terms of time that it makes you kind of crazy. And so this is something that, because we lack the specialized skills to do that work ourselves, we would focus on the back end of the mobile app. But honestly, I'm getting, I gotta admit, a little frustrated enough with the pace of development and how quickly we're able to make changes to it, that I think after this round, I think we're going to move the development of that in-house, despite the fact that the actual development process is kind of a pain in the tuchus. Just gonna say. I see here a couple comments in here. Steve Desner asks, does deleting comics when issues are deleted happen during the content updates, or just when manually deleted? Only when manually deleted, and then only if you are specifically saying, hey, did you, if you delete an issue, did you also want to clock the any existing pictures for that one? I'm not going to be wiping files off your hard disk unless you're exactly saying what you're looking for. There are, if you're just kind of feeling like you want to clean up your picture library, as in over time things will change names, and sometimes you'll get leftover pictures and things like that. There is actually a tech tip for doing that somewhat efficiently, using hidden features of ComicBase that even I could not tell you at the dawn of a hat. It's one of those things where, like, if you really like scratching that itch, it just says that every file on my computer is in exactly its right place. This is the sort of thing that you could do. It might be a good project over the holidays, maybe, if you're feeling like it, and you could recover several megs of unused disk space. For the rest of those people, it's kind of like managing the files in your cache. When you're just using the web browser, not super interesting. So probably won't get into it today. But if people are interested, let me know, and I'll do my background. Because, like I say, it actually does involve super hidden keys and things like that, because it's such a utility function. It's something that we have we have an admin version of ComicBase that we use to kind of run the show for our purposes. It's something that's apparent in there, but we actually made it in a feature that pops up magically if you do some hidden stuff in other things, but it's not part of the interface we show up normally. Anyway. Hopefully it's not too obscure. Oh, and hello to Xanadu Comics from wet and windblown Seattle. We also have Jet City Comics in the house. Let's see here. Let's see. Aura asks, notice that there's a search field for country codes. Something we want to find all. We want to find all the comics from India. That is an actual thing that you can do. Is it possible to find a list of all the CB country codes, please? Yeah, it's actually the UN standard. It's the UN publishes it's called the Alpha 2 code, but it's a standard index. So of all the countries on the planet, and it typically follows the currency. If you notice, like, the British pound is GBP, the US dollar is USD. The first two letters of that are always the official UN country code. There is a database we draw off of for that one. If, I guess, guys are interested, I'm sure I could find a link to it and include it in the show spaces. But yes, if you want to say, for instance, find all the comics that we have that are from India, you could do an advanced search or just do a country search for all the comics where the country code is IN, and it would do that. Or for that matter, if you want to say, hey, I want to find all things where they're not from India, you would say, find all the ones where the country code is not IN, and it would do that. Let me see what else is going on here. Department of Comics joining us. Welcome. Northeast Florida. Let's see. Will the ComicBase app work on Android tablet? It should. One thing that we went back and forth on, and if you, and this is one of those things where, like a lot of you, I have literally a drawer full of old devices. We use, it's like iPhones and Android tablets and things like that, there's nothing wrong with them. They work, but at some point they just kind of fell out of use, or people passed them along or things like that. And we typically use them for testing. You kind of power them up, you install it on half a dozen things. You say, okay, yeah, it's also working on this, 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 and this. Now, over time, because that used to be kind of a somewhat reasonable approach back in like around 2010. Since that time, there are literally tens of thousands of devices that run on Android and even iOS that you can't even get any kind of reasonable cross-section of these things done. It's good for quick testing if you just want to plug it in and see how it looks, but it's not great for compatibility testing. So these days, if you have anything that you're very worried about having compatibility issues, typically you'll use these things called test flight and whatever. So where there are companies where they will actually have, if you actually look at their data centers, it's like USB jacks going into a device which is kept on permanent power, and then with a network connection to something which it's just rows and rows and rows of old phones just on shelves and tablets and things like that. And what you'll do is you'll pay for time to use their virtual library of test devices. It's a very weird thing. Mobile development is just, I can't tell you how strange it is if you haven't ever worked in it. It's unlike anything else on the planet, and the worst part is you acquire these very, very specialized skills in order to play, and your skills are valid for about, I mean, anywhere from about 3 days to about 3 years on the max. By 3 years from now, whatever you're developing in is almost guaranteed to be obsolete, and you'll have to develop in something else. So Apple introduced Swift, Microsoft introduced Maui, Android went through various dev kits and things like that. It's crazy making if you're a developer. Enterprise software is probably like the opposite extreme, where like you remember when Y2K came out, they were searching for people like, hey, we seem to have fired our last COBOL programmers. Anyone out there still remember COBOL? And I was thinking like, yeah, I could make a few quick bucks there. That was something that I actually had to whip out in school. So yeah. But anyway, the mobile development is just a tough biz. I'm gonna not bother with it right now. All right, so let me see what else is. And the Department of Comics is just a little bit slow to the show here. But anyway, welcome. I did not get a chance to actually post that out on the Slack. Otherwise, I would let you know. But yes, before the show, I literally went back and say, okay, what are the, I call them like spots on your tie issues, like the little things that aren't super high priority in terms of bugs or feature requests, but they're like a spot on your tie. It's not like it's not like your shirt burst open or your clothes are on fire or anything else like that. It's just you feel like kind of a dork if it's sitting there. And so I kind of went through all the lists of things, like they were like what are this that's just like on the little honeydew list, can we just knock off before showtime today? And so we knocked off pretty much the list. Still futzing with the mobile thing, so yeah, we'll let you know. All right, so but yes, the request, Department of Comics was actually the person who had put in the request to delete the pictures, which is, it's one of those things where like I'll get these things and I'll say, okay, is it going to be of super interest to a lot of people? And I just say, yeah, probably not. On the other hand, but is it the right thing to do? And it's like, and that's the part where like, damn it, if it's the right thing to do, and it's like, even if it only like a couple people are ever going to call us on it, that's the kind of thing that just sticks under my head. It might not get immediate priority from me, especially if I'm working on things that have like a lot more urgency to them, but it's probably the kind of thing that just won't kind of go off the honeydew list until it's done. So yeah, for what's worth. All right, so let me see there. And I think, and there's more. Okay, so we got that. And we're already making the snarky comments. Excellent. All right, so cool. All right, so other things are coming out. Okay, first, a number of questions people have had recently. One just came up and I've had this one come up for a number of times. I'm just going to bring out other co-students, bring them out down, is selling on Atomic Avenue. And I've had a number of people ask for just requests on like, well, what's the deal? How do you do it? What's it about? And so forth. And I will give you my unvarnished impression of this, colored utterly by the fact that I am associated with both systems. So, but I'll still give you the idea. The thing is unbiased, a method as I can manage in my life. So, we've got the ability in ComicBase to, if you have the archive edition, you can export your data out as what's called a ComicBase interchange format file. So you can even, there's an e-commerce format that we've defined. You can look at it on the help file that will literally tell you that, how to write a converter that will let you load this thing into pretty much any third-party system on the planet. Very simply, it's kind of like if you know how to read a Word doc, you can import that with any other thing on the planet because they've documented the format. We did the same thing, and it's a much less complicated format with ComicBase e-commerce files, which if you have the archive edition, you can export. You also can export just your regular comic list from pretty much most of the versions of ComicBase. I think the Free and the Express don't do it. But everything from Pro and up does. But all the versions of ComicBase come built in with integration to a system called Atomic Avenue, which at the moment has something close to 2 million comics for sale on it. It's pretty cool. The idea, I'm going to go back to the main camera now because I'm clearly vamping a little bit. So the idea about Atomic Avenue came up. It's a while back now, but it was about 10 years into ComicBase's development, sitting down and realized that gosh, we have some tens of millions of comic books that have been entered into ComicBase by different users over the years. What if we gave everyone a big sell button? Where, because it's already, all your stuff is already priced out. You already know the values of everything. So if you had the ability to just click, mark the things you want to sell and just say sell and post them to a central place, then anyone looking to fill in their collection could pretty quickly find people who are looking to get rid of things in their collection. And that might be a really cool thing. As we all know, I mean, the real one of the problems that we all know and we kind of try to ignore most of our life with comic books, or for that matter, I mean, it wouldn't matter if we were doing Franklin Mint, commemorative plates, any kind of collectible like this sort of thing. It has a high value if you've got the right buyer, right? I mean, so if the right, the one guy who's looking for a copy of, let me just randomly stretch, the Sacrificers, right? Just the last comic book I happen to, do. If I know a guy who's looking for Sacrificers number 12, he would be absolutely happy today to pay cover price for this one at least. And if it's something that is a little more obscure, some indie comic from the 80s, whatever the whole thing is, there is, for all these things, there's a guy who wants them or a gal who wants them, but finding that person is a pain in the tuchus. And so then just in the business we're in, just even if all you want to do is index your comic books and say, well, what are they worth? You still got to stare down the problem of what's the price? Because the price is always, at the end of the day, it's what will someone pay me for it? And then the question is so if I take the Sacrificers and I walk it to my neighbor down the street and say, hey man, this comic book, how much are you giving me for it? You'll be like, I don't know, quarter. It's like, because he wasn't particularly interested in that comic book, and and so forth. Even if I take it to a comics, a comic convention or a comic store, and I say, okay, Sacrificers number 12, who's got money? I'll get ranges that are a little better, but I got to find somebody who's actually reading the Sacrificers and who hasn't bought issue 12 yet in order to get the price. But if I do find him, he's happy to pay it. So it's a weird thing. And it's just as frustrating if you're on the other end of that deal. Like, let's say I got the Sacrifices. I have issues number 10, 11, and the local comic shop did not order that one. What am I going to do? At that point, you're perfectly happy to pay the price. And it doesn't matter whether it's a new comic book like that or an old comic book. It's, there's always someone looking for it and there's someone who's trying to sell it, and it's really hard for the two to find each other. So our big idea with Atomic Avenue when we created it is, well, God, we've got more comics inventory in our system than like anyone, and they're all priced. Right. So you don't have to go back to them and say, well, how much will you want for this? How much you want for that? I mean, we have the pricing working at this point on a weekly basis. So if we just said, all right, everyone who wants to sell, meet everyone who wants to buy, and things will be in different conditions, and there will be from different sellers, and different sellers will probably have different ratings because some people are going to be just aces at getting the book out. The second you order it, they'll be like Amazon themselves. And other people will be like, I got to go to the storage unit and it might take me a day. And it's like, there's different folks. But if we had a place where they could all meet, then we could probably make a lot of people happy. So that was the genesis of Atomic Avenue. So Atomic Avenue has been going for quite a long time now. And I used to know the stats on eBay, but it was pretty quick after we had done the genesis of Atomic Avenue, where there were way more comic books for sale on Atomic Avenue than there were on eBay, which is pretty cool. Now, eBay is really great for, I'm going to say, I'll give them their due. They're really great for velocity. If you get something that's selling, that's a hot comic book, like I've got the J variant of the hot new Vampirella, whatever the thing is, you'll probably find more people who are cruising eBay for that thing, to get the hot new cool thing. And I know this because when something suddenly becomes hot, like let's say, I don't know, Masters of the Universe gets reoptioned for TV or something like that, and it's been kind of dead title for a while. It hasn't really been moving, and then suddenly like, oh, Kevin Smith's going to do Masters of the Universe. Like Atomic Avenue will just get cleared out instantly of any of the key issues of Masters of the Universe. It'll happen like within an hour of the announcement of the property getting picked up. So I mean, I literally remember getting I'm sitting in the office in San Jose, and some new show had just been optioned on someone, like the report had run on TMZ, and suddenly like, okay, and I'm looking at the traffic, and it's like, oh wow, I just saw like 17 different orders for this one title that had not moved out of anybody's collection at any price for like a million years. It was like the most unpopular title on the planet, and suddenly some guy's just listening to the TMZ report, and where do I find him? And he clears out eBay, he clears out Atomic Avenue, because you would clear out your local comic shop if he had it, but chances are he doesn't. But so I mean, this clearinghouse thing is actually really cool for that sort of thing, and it's also really good for feeding the price into the market, because what'll happen, the other thing that's kind of neat about the way Atomic Avenue works is because we're partnered with them, we get all their data. So we know what people are listing stuff for it. We know whether it's selling or whether it's not selling. And we know that when something sells, we get that pricing. And we also know the grade pretty hard, because Atomic Avenue is absolute hard asses about grade. eBay, not always. eBay is pretty good for CGC things. I mean, you're going to get the CGC thing you promise, but if you're just cruising eBay and it's some new seller you've never seen before, and it says like, I got the comics, I think they're all near mint. It's like, you might want to send some pictures or something, because if the guy's not an experienced guy, your experiences can be really uneven. Let's just put it that way. When you go to other sites, as to am I really going to get the comic I promised? Whereas like that is absolutely part of the deal when you buy on Atomic Avenue. And honestly, I've had people who like, I've shipped comic books. I mean, I've shipped thousands and thousands of orders, but every once in a while I'll get one someone says, "Hey, you said this thing was near mint. I see here and they'll point out some little defect out that I hadn't noticed somehow in handling the comic book, where I was like, ooh, ouch. Okay, well, let's make that right for you. And you might, giving them credit or giving them return on the comic or doing whatever the heck the thing is. But it even happens to me, is what I'm saying, is that, there's no immunity from being, you got to get the grade right, because people, when they buy a comic book, I mean, as we all know, that's a big part of the price, and you got to do it. Anyway, but sorry, a lot of topics suddenly in my head, and I'm trying to narrow down the thoughts so I can move on with the overall main discussion. But anyway, so the idea on Atomic Avenue, like I say, put together the buyers, put together the sellers, and it works out pretty good. Now, it's got some strengths and it's got some weaknesses. So we talked about eBay is, for really hot things, pretty good. Atomic Avenue really excels on the breadth of the catalog. So I mean, they call it long tail, if you follow old Wired articles on the subject, is that Atomic Avenue is going to be like probably your best place to find a rando comic book that from just whatever. It's just like, I just started reading Starlog, and I just want to pick up as many issues of Starlog as I can possibly get, because the local comic shop somehow acquired a collection where they had 15 issues of them, and now I'm curious about the rest of the entire title. And you could go to a million comic stores and not find another issue of Starlog, but you will find them on Atomic Avenue. You won't find them on eBay half the time, but you will find them on Atomic Avenue. That kind of stuff is freaking awesome. And I'm constantly, my routine, because I basically have the whole collection that I have, unless it's something very special to me, is up for sale on Atomic Avenue. I just post it, I just mark it all for sale, and it all goes up there. And I kind of start my day every day by saying, okay, what Atomic Avenue orders I got. And so before as I'm doing email and things like that, I kind of pull the orders from Atomic Avenue, ship them out, and you kind of do things like that. Now, the financial model of how Atomic Avenue how the payments work and things like that. And for all this stuff, I'm going to mostly say, by all means, go to atomicavenue.com. Just look at the help, and it has like a very quick getting started. But the general gist of that system is it's lock, stock, and barrel copied from how Amazon works. If you ever bought sold a used book on Amazon or sold a used video game or something, the idea is people who are looking for the thing can find it on that system. They will then say, okay, hey, he's got a copy of Blood Rain, second edition for the PS2 or something, whatever the heck the thing is you're buying. They buy it. You, as the seller, get a note saying, hey, congratulations, you've just sold, Blood Rain second edition to this guy over here. Make sure you ship it. You've got a couple days to ship it. And after that, as soon as you mark it shipped, then a little clock starts. And 2 weeks after that clock, and I think it's done every Monday, so it's 2 weeks to the Monday after you ship it, then you just get a transfer into your bank account of all the money less the commission. Now, where Atomic Avenue is cooler than Amazon for doing things like that. First of all, it's got the integration with ComicBase, which makes the posting really, really easy. Literally, all you got to do is mark the stuff as for sale, say post, and in 30 seconds, your stuff is up. Whereas Amazon, it's like it's a process. Same thing goes for eBay and things like that. I mean, there's tools to make it a little less hellish, but the integration with ComicBase is just really slick. If I do say so myself. Anyway. But anyway, so that's kind of the deal. You don't handle the money yourself. Atomic Avenue handles the money, and then you get the whole thing less. I think it basically comes down to a 15% commission, and that includes all the credit card processing fees and PayPal and all the other stuff like that. So that's all in the 15% that you pay. So you don't pay anything on top of that. And that's and actually, if you look at what Atomic Avenue gets out of the whole thing, the overwhelming majority of that 15% is the stupid credit card and PayPal processing fees and things like that. So they're not like raping you in terms of the whole thing. If you compare them to like what any of the other systems take, they're actually super, super competitive. I mean, they tend to bear them by. At one point, I've seen like a kind of like a cross tab between the different systems. It was a few years ago, but it's like, oh, that's like a pretty sizable amount. So anyway, where Atomic Avenue, like I say, really scores is ease of posting. If you're coming from ComicBase, awesome. It's very, very good for selling things that you did not know you were going to sell. Just if you just and there's no listing fees, and so it doesn't cost you anything to just have your stuff up there and just wait passively for things to come in. Just when they do, just make sure for everyone's sake that you're capable of pulling your comic book and getting it out in the mail and pushing it in a couple days time. If you're not, then you're not making anyone happy, and that's not a good thing for anyone. So that kind of onesie-twosie stuff, it's excellent for. Things not so good for. Right now it has sets. They're not great, the support on those. I do know there's plans to fix that. It's one of these things that just it's been in the works. I think there's going to be some stuff happening soon, but it's been a feature that needs to be better. I'll be the first one to say that. For like I say, very, very high velocity items, like the hottest comic book on the market that you can think of right now, eBay will have more traffic on those, because eBay tends to be very speculatory, in terms of like people go on those, whereas any kind of fixed system, whether it's Mile High or Atomic Avenue or anybody else like that who's got a certain inventory, because this is really people's collections. It's not like they have an infinite pile of them and they're not buying them themselves, except on the back end as collectors and stuff like that. If something just come out of nowhere gets hot, it'll get hot, and and it's kind of cool because, like I say, we'll get the sale price and we'll get that the price is suddenly hitting very hard, and it'll raise the price in ComicBase. But that does take a week or two to start really rolling in effect if it's one of these things that just came out of nowhere and gets super hot, as opposed to say like your typical Silver Age comic book, which has been getting it's been growing in value week after week, month after month, year after year. That one isn't so spiky, but when things do get spiky, think of like the first appearance of Black Panther when they announced the Black Panther movie, right? It might have gone from whatever, I'm just going to say $50, suddenly it's $300, and that'll happen instantly. That's just, I mean, if you're the kind of guy who this is your business, and any other people who are, have comics in your name right now, this is your business. So, yes, you will react to that probably faster than the average bear. You're not just waiting for ComicBase to change it, but ComicBase in the meanwhile will see both that you're changing your price, and they'll also see that you're getting it or whether you're not getting it, and they take that into effect when they do the pricing that we get. So it's a nice, it's kind of like they call it a virtuous circle, where it's like we actually get the data, but then that gives a more balanced view of the market, and we can give that to everyone else. And so then the idea being, if we all had a very balanced view of what the current market price is on everything, then we would all be at what they call the market clearing price. In other words, I want to sell you an issue of Sacrificers. If you want to buy an issue of Sacrificers, that we wouldn't have a lot of haggling back and forth. Is that and be like, price is fair, and we would do business. Whereas if I price this thing for $100 because, oh yeah, it's the rare edition, there are only 3,000 printed or whatever the hell the print run is, 3,000, $1,000, this thing would sit on my backboard forever in my comic store. And honestly, for $1, it's just kind of a waste of my time, right? Because I mean, why am I giving it away for $1 in my buck box? Because I couldn't find a seller, a buyer, where if I could have found the guy who's looking for this thing, they would happily have paid the $4.95 for it. So that's the idea. So that's Atomic Avenue. As for the actual mechanics of how it works, this is the simple part, and this will go on to, so hopefully laid out what the system does at least. Oh, demo machine, come back to me, baby. I think it's, there we go. Okay, cool. So as for the actual mechanics of it, if you look at any issue in ComicBase, let's go ahead and pull this up right now. And do I still have my... No, of course, I don't have the magnifier on. Let's go ahead and turn that on. Okay, so if you look at all the issues in here, they all have this for sale checkbox right over here. So if that's checked, it has really only one purpose in life, and that is to say that if I were to go and post it to Atomic Avenue, this would be one of the things that I'd be selling. So by default, none of your stuff is marked as for sale. If you wanted to mark it for sale, you could either go, issue by issue and mark it that way. You could go title by title and just hit, quick change, select all, quick change, and mark it for sale. But I would say if in general you do want to sell things, the easiest way to go and do any of this stuff is go up here under, I believe it's the, where are we at here? No, is the items menu? I always go back and forth on these ones because I just remember the keystroke. So if you go to mass change is how I would do it. And if you say to yourself, hey, no, actually this database, I in general want to sell things, just go ahead and go to mass change here in comic books. You can pick which field you want to mass change. I just typed in F and it took me out of for sale, but I could change any field. And you want to set it to value, and then the value you want to set it to is checked. And if I hit mass change, at that point then everything in my database is now theoretically for sale. All right, so what's going to happen in addition to that to make it actually be for sale? Well, the only thing I have to do after that is I need to go up under here and periodically say, post items for sale to Atomic Avenue. Now here, let me go ahead and actually mark a couple of things as for sale, just so I can show this. All right, so I'm going to go mass. All right, here I'm just going to go quick change and say for sale, and I'm going to set that to is checked. All right, make changes. Great. All right, and I've got at least a couple of these things that are in stock. Let's go ahead and say I've got to copy that and copy that. All right, now if I come up under here and I say internet, post items for sale to Atomic Avenue, or control the unlikely control U as a command for the whole thing, which I guess is meant to be short for upload. All right, so it'll say, hey, wow, congratulations, you got a whopping 3 items for sale up here, which if you got all your money for them would make you a whole $13.74. And then you get a couple options. You can say things like, all right, do you want to offer free standard shipping? Usually a good idea. People love them some free shipping, and you set yourself a limit so that you're not going to go completely broke doing it. The nice thing about free shipping, and it's funny because I'll occasionally, because I test ComicBase a lot and I'm always resetting my own settings, and that's not default on, is I can absolutely tell in my own sales when I've got that thing turned on and when I don't, because the sales slow down a lot if it's turned off. So I would definitely suggest, offer free shipping over a certain amount. It doesn't need to be $50. It could be $20. It could be $150. Whatever you want. Unfortunately, under the current rules, yes, you are required, because you are a seller, to collect sales tax for different parts of things. In my neck of the woods, it's 8.75%. God help us. Good news in Tennessee is that's the only tax we pay other than property tax. So That part's cool. But you can have it automatically add that on, and then if someone from, say, Tennessee buys any of my comic books, I got to remit the tax on the sale, and they will automatically collect the tax on the sale. They'll just add it into the whole thing. And then you can also do some of the things. You can have it automatically, reprice some comics if they're not moving quickly or not. You can. Some people use half grades if you like using like VF plus, VF minus, sort of things like that. Atomic Avenue doesn't, because they do, make sure that people are sending things the right way. And arbitrating half grade disputes was considered too much time for them to get into. So you can have it automatically normalize conditions is what this does. It'll make if I have a book that's marked to say VF plus, it'll move it down to VF, or if it's VF minus, it'll move it down to VG, whatever the standard overstreet conditions are, just so that we're not dealing the half grades. You can have that, or you can leave it alone if you want. And then you've also got the option, if you have very fine and near mint items, you can have them listed as very fine to near mint. So very fine through near mint, which if you guys have ever dealt in like mail order type stuff, that's kind of like the thing that makes mail order possible in the modern world, because it's if I'm going to ship some guy a $3 comic book, and then he's going to get mad at me because it had a ding in the 1/16 of an inch in the bottom right corner, and so it's really VF, he's going to want like a buck of that $3 back, or I'll have to say, or you can send it back to me and I'll give you a full refund. That is too much trouble for a lot of people, and so they you can use this grade as like a safety marker for yourself to say, like I know it's going to be just about as good. And if the buyer's willing to go for it, you can say, look, it's anywhere between VF and near mint. It might be VF, might be near mint, might be VF plus, might be NM minus, but somewhere in that range. As long as it's that range, you are fine as far as the system's concerned. That, of course, does come at a little bit of a price difference in terms of how people think of it. If I guarantee it's near mint and it really is near mint, that's worth a little bit more to people than if I say, it's VF2 near mint. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people, especially people looking to fill holes in collections, who are like, yeah, very fine to near mint's good enough for me. And then you also can say whether or not you want to mark items when selling. All right. And at that point, you would then say post your inventory, and then it would go up to Atomic Avenue, and within about half an hour, you would be live. And at that point, all you got to do is, kind of wait for things to start happening for you, in terms of like, you'll start getting email that says you've sold, X thing, mail to this guy. And as soon as you go on Atomic Avenue, you say, okay, yeah, I order shipped, here's the tracking number. 2 weeks after that one, and then on that next Monday, you get the transfer into your bank account, and it's all actually pretty easy to get that going. So that is the kind of like the long version of, like I say, as fair as I can be about the whole thing. You can take all of it with however many grains of salt you feel appropriate, because I do have an interest in both systems. But I'm also over here at ComicBase and Atomic Avenue, we're big fans of, they say, eating your own dog food. In other words, my collection's up for sale in it, and my collection is, so I got to deal with the shipping, I got to deal with whatever else, just like I use ComicBase to track my collection, right? And so it's a really good way to get, anything that's annoying for you, you can escalate pretty quickly to make sure it's no longer annoying, so that it keeps you honest about the whole process. So that's, like I say, that's how that works. So hopefully this is useful. All right, so let me go back to the chat now, and then we'll get on to other things. So let's see. Okay. Okay, Florida. Okay, we talked about the Android tablets. Okay, talked about that. Okay, some guy said he bought off Atomic Avenue, said happy overall, but he didn't like some of the conditions. Yeah, it could be a thing. I mean, it happens. It's any place where there's two people buying and selling, someone. I mean, I'll put it this way: if in general people aren't happy, then your system's dead. But yeah, I mean, I bought off Amazon. I'm 99% happy, and occasionally there's something that was like, I had to send it back. It happens, but okay. But and some people says, I think it's still a little too critical. Don't know, that happens too. I've also, and again, it's a fair thing. Comics are hard, it's just I mean, they're a fundamentally flimsy object. I mean, look at this. I mean, we've got a bag, we've got a board, just to stiffen it up, just so it's capable of being handled by a human carefully, right? Much less stick it in in an envelope, try to ship it across the country and get it to a guy. So, I mean, it's not an easy thing to sell. It's part of the appeal of the idea of, oh, heck with comics, I'm just going to now I'm going to turn them into plastic slabs and stick a grade label on them, so no one will ever open them up again to inspect them. That is part of the appeal. I'm not lying, and that is why if you're selling anything at an auction, like a big ticket item, if you're selling on Heritage, that's a big part of why they will say, well, okay, we'll sell this thing, but this $20,000 comic book, we're going to go and we're going to get it CGC'd for you just in order to sell it, because we're not going to be arguing grade after the fact. That is one of those things. But yeah, I mean, you can get burned because, yeah, somebody didn't notice the little thing that that you noticed as a buyer. By the way, another good hint I'd say for people when you're grading your comic books, if you can, because it's kind of like judging your children. It's like, we always want to see the best in the comic books that we bought and the things that we bought. It's like, we know that that couch is incredibly comfy, even though it's got that one weird little stain by the headboard or whatever else from when it got nicked into the wall. I mean, we love that, but we just know it's the really good comfy couch for watching TV, and we think it's a wonderful. It could be that the person buying it only can see the little paint transfer when you nicked it into the wall. I mean, that could be the only thing they can see. They don't see the comfy. They don't see where else. The same thing goes if you're buying comic books. I mean, I know that this might be the greatest story ever, and this is a wonderful copy of it. But if it's got a 1/16 of an inch bend in the lower right-hand corner, there are guys who like that will be the only thing they can see, and they've got a right. But they also people who like, it can be absolutely perfectly, like Overstreet himself could be grading this thing, and be like, yes, that is exactly near mint, or even near mint plus, or whatever else. It's one of the reasons we try not to deal in half grades on the system, because as soon as you get into that thing, then just everything just gets very difficult. But for examples of that, take the same comic, ship it to CGC, where you're paying for the grading, get a grade, crack it open, ship it back. What are the odds that you get the same grade? Well, it's a long way from 100%. I'll say that. Anyway, but with that said, there are people who just they're too picky. I mean, this is like, no, this is exactly near mint. I didn't say it was mint. I said so it's allowed to have slight printing imperfections. It's allowed to have the slightest bits of cover gloss missing. I mean, etc. I mean, it's the page does not have to be perfectly centered on the whole thing. It's I mean, there are imperfections that are allowed within the scope of near mint. And so if you say it's near mint, or for that matter any other grade, there are people who be like, no, but I really kind of in my heart I wanted something that was better than that. So they can get too picky. And in fact, one of the feature requests I've seen for Atomic Avenue is from people to actually be able to, I want to be able to automatically block people who are being too picky on grading. Whereas, like, I'm shipping them stuff that is exactly correctly graded, but you're just being kind of a jerk. At which point, yeah, you can certainly cancel the guy's order, but then the system penalizes you for that. And so I have seen the feature request. I don't know exactly where it stands in the grand scheme of development of the whole thing, but there's definitely been talk about can we have a block list of people who are just jerks? Yeah, I'm going to say, just in my own experience, most of the time when someone's beat me up about grade, every once in a while, yeah, it's the whole thing. But usually when someone beats me up about grade, it's like, oh crap, that's on me. Yeah, I didn't see that. Sorry. And for what's worth, I don't get beat up about grade much. Just it stings whenever you do get hit. So I think my percentage is like 97% or something. But yeah, but it's all the ones you get wrong sting. So you don't forget them. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. Someone said I sent a price check on Supergirl and Legion of Superheroes number some variant because it's been selling on eBay for over 400 raw. Wow. Okay, great. Yeah, and it's also one of the reasons we have the price check feature in ComicBase, because there are things that can take off way too fast, and especially if it's like a variant where it takes off and it goes really fast. And especially if there isn't a lot of supporting evidence for it. So if it was like one comic that managed to sell, but it sold for like a crazy amount, If the price move in ComicBase, if we see, because we're watching in ComicBase, we're watching Atomic Avenue, we're watching Heritage Auction Galleries. So there's a range at which you say, okay, yeah, as I said before, people listing it at a price is one thing. People selling at a price is a much more pronounced market signal, but it's a signal of limited duration. So in other words, it's like a shove toward that price in terms of voting for that price in the model, but it's a shove that only lasts for 30 days. After 30 days, we don't care anymore. We figure it's old data and it doesn't count. And then you go back to what are people listing it for, which is a vote. It's a nudge, but it's not. But it doesn't by itself set the price, because there's a lot of people who will price things just too high. And if it turns out, like Conan the Barbarian, for lots and lots of years, I used to see it in like the Overstreet Price Guide. It'd be all the prices. I'm going for just wildly out of date, but let's say there's an issue of Conan the Barbarian that it'd be listed for $7, and it never ever. I mean, like I'm trying to fill in my Conans at the local comic shops, and they never ever sell. You can see as you go through a comic shop what's selling, what isn't, and you can see like, oh well, yeah, these aren't moving. But then when they'd have their half off sale, then suddenly the Conans would clear out. It's like, okay, so what does that tell you? And I think it tells you that the market clearing price for the Conans was somewhere between list price, Overstreet, and half off. Because at half off they would move, and especially look at the ones that didn't move at half off. Then you're kind of like, well, it might still be a little high. But anyway, so yeah, it's one thing to have it listed at a certain point. It's much more interesting to see what it moves for. But when it's a really big price move, like let's say you get let's say you sacrifice your number 12 here. Let's say that this suddenly becomes, I don't know, someone famous did something in it. It's got it was discovered to have a strange slur on page 22, which is suddenly all the copies were being pulped, whatever the thing is. There was a weird Marvel thing that hit like that recently. But this thing could take off, and suddenly eBay might be like, oh my god, I gotta get on it. And they might be like, $4.95, my god, I'll buy it. And there might be a guy watching this thing that says, well, I'm moving my copy for $8. And that one, which is again practically like an 80% increase. And his might sell. And then the next guy might look at that and says, well, screw it, mine's 50, right? Which again is suddenly a very, very heavy increase. And then the last guy says, oh, my copy's 400, right? These things actually do happen. Things get hot. The way ComicBase deals with it is if it's a price jump, like it's a sale, but it's wildly outside of where the guide had been, then it kind of says, I gotta see more data on that. And because if one guy claims that somehow bought a copy of this thing for $400, and the guide price had been $5 beforehand, it's not going to $400. It's not even going to $550 based on that. It's considered on the back of that one sale. The one guy was just insane. Which can happen. Same thing if I'd gone and you'd listed your copy for $500 or $400, it wouldn't get voted in at all unless there are a bunch of other people who are voting for it too. Because if you start seeing multiple data points on things like that, then suddenly the model can say like, something's up. At which point then it allows itself to factor in these, with the crazy, you'd call them outlier data points. But you don't want to make it so that someone can move the market themselves just by having them take their collection and price them to the ends of the earth. A lot of price guides would have like friends of the price guide where like suddenly it's like, hey, I bought up a big Werewolf by Night collection. I remember Werewolf by Night went from being like a $3 comic to being like a $100 comic book, like in one edition of the Overstreet Price Guide. It was like, Werewolf by Night, really? And what you typically find behind these things is someone had just bought up a big collection and put a bug in someone's ear that says, well, I think this one is really hot stuff over by mine. I remember there was one guy in Colorado who was just determined that he was going to corner the market on Strawberry Shortcake #1. And he was sending all his people out to all the San Diego because he was like, yeah, Strawberry Shortcake #1 is that's the new hotness. And yeah, for a while he had cornered the market on Strawberry Shortcake #1, and then he also was going to put a bug in the guy with the price guy saying, well, what everyone in my neck of the country knows, which you guys rubes haven't caught on to you, is that Strawberry Shortcake #1 is the new hotness, and that's that comic book that you have from $1 in all of your price guides and which hasn't moved in your dollar boxes forever. Yeah, I'm getting $100 a copy for that one. that's a thing that happens. Anyway, there is a mechanism in overall in ComicBase, things react pretty good to the market, signals on things like this, but it's not perfect. And so either when things move super fast, or if they move, but it's sort of like they move in a very strange way, in a ways that the model isn't accounting for properly. And sometimes things get pumped up too far, because like you get me and a bunch of my buddies say that there's this thing, but the market does not believe it at all. Is it takes a while to deflate down. It can go the other way too. But one thing you can do is you can do a feature in ComicBase where you just highlight the book in question. You say, dude, this just looks wrong to me. I think that this is the cool cover. It's the one everyone in my store was absolutely raving about. It's all the hotness. Everyone on eBay is talking about it. You've got it at $10. I think it's 400. In which case you'd say, okay, highlight Supergirl 23A, price check 400. It'll say, well, what's your source? And that goes to the editors, and the editors they'll look at your source, and they'll look at other people, and they'll say, what do we think is true? And they'll do a manual correction on that. We generally don't try to put our fingers on the scale on these things. We really try to make the market tell us what the price is on stuff. But there is a time when no, really, there's some strange stuff afoot, and you want to be able to correct for it fast rather than slow. It's the right thing to do. So we have that mechanism as well. All right. Let's see what else is going on there. Yes, and they say that the Supergirl book has sold at those prices. Yes, and that's good. Like I say, the weighting in ComicBase is very much like, listing it at a price is a vote for that price, but it's a nudge. So you'll see it start to drift towards the general average of prices that people have things for sale at. But when something actually sells, it's a sharp shock. It's a hard vote. It has a lot more. We assign a lot more weight to that, the actual sale in both directions. If it turns out there's a lot of people selling it, like say the Conan situation, a lot of people who have voted, they've got listed very high, but if the people who are selling it either lower or higher than that, it will move quickly towards whatever the sale price was. That's where things go. Or says, is there a cap on AA commission if someone sells 10K books, the commission 15K of 1,500? I don't. I think it's less when you go higher, but I know they've responded over the years to different changes to PayPal terms and credit card fees and things like that. So honestly, it tends to be like a couple % over what the heck they're getting charged, is my sense of it. But on the other hand, that's not my business line. I'm the king of comic-based stuff. There are other people who get into the mix on the Atomic Avenue type of thing, but Atomic Avenue, I know there's a sheet somewhere. If you go to help and you say, it'll say selling on Atomic Avenue, it's just like the third thing you'll see is here's the commission structure. But and this is self-interested, I have a lot of things like this to sell. I have not a lot of things like Amazing Fantasy 15. For me, it's 15% is, all done and done is what my life comes out to. But I do believe it's less as you get to the heavier books. All right, see. Hey, and Ed joining here. Welcome to here. Let's see here. And someone saying thank you for the wish list stuff on Atomic Avenue. Excellent. Hopefully, and Oro says, shouldn't actual sales carry for more weight than the speculators wild ups? Yeah, and that was definitely the goal on how the pricing model goes. Is we're trying to find what's the market clearing price, and so the biggest thing, if you've got real data that says, no, really, someone's buying it at this much, that's what it's going to go for. But you also have to be able to say, okay, was that sale a fluke? I mean, people get, sometimes expensive things go for cheap because it wasn't their week. Sometimes, cheap things go for expensive because people just really, really, really want it. I was talking to a guy right before the showtime who had you couldn't even grade it, a book of Detective Comics number 27, which I think he said he got like 70K for. And it was one where, he said, well, it's complete-ish, so, well, if it's complete, but it's messed up, then you say it's poor, right? But this one, we're like, there was like a centerfold or centerpiece of it where they had like take a photocopy from something else and stitch it in there. And so you say, well, yeah, but so it was not something you could conventionally grade in any sense. And so I don't know, all you could do is describe it accurately and say, well, it's an ungraded book that's this, whatever that is, and you can get a lot of money for something like that. Whereas if you'd sat there and say, well, what would it be if it were just in poor? And I think poor is like 0.5% of near mint is the generic way we would look at that. At that point, it might have implied that the selling price for a complete Action Comics #1 in near mint was like 14 million or something. If I might be slipping a decimal one way or another. But yeah, I mean, things can go wildly to skew one way or the other. But that's why we also say, like, did this go at some extreme that maybe we should not be considering this in the data? Like this one's just kind of a one-off. At which point, then we literally throw that data point out and we say, well, let's wait till something that's a little bit more normal comes in, and we'll consider that. But if multiple points come in that all say the same kind of thing, then those do get averaged in. All right, so that's about it. All right, so wow, I've been talking about this one topic for a really, really long time. Okay, well, and obviously, and I've also run to just about the end of it. Okay, well, gosh, I guess this has now turned into the Atomic Avenue show. All right, guys, I guess that's what it. So I'm gonna actually, because I think everything else I would talk about would take much longer. So I think we're going to take it from there. So I'll say just the announcements for everyone. If this is the sort of stuff that is useful to you, please like and subscribe. Do look for the new version of the Android version, but I'm gonna say give it a day or two if you're using the new version of the mobile one, and then please, if you would, tell us what you think. Just if you're having any kind of issues, support at comicbase.com. It kind of breaks your heart when you see people who will write to like the Google store and like it'll be from anonymous Android user. I had a problem that and I'm thinking could have been easily solved if we'd ever talked to you. It's so like a login issue, and I didn't tell anyone who I was, and I didn't go anywhere, and so then I have a problem, and so I hate it. It's like, okay, I'm sorry you were disappointed, but if you could talk to us, that'd be great, because then we could figure out what's wrong with your user ID or whatever the thing is. So anyway, but if you have a problem with anything that we're doing, please support at comicbase.com is an actual email address that does get actually answered. 408-266-6883 is an actual phone number that does get answered by actual people, including guy right before the show, as it turns out. But anyway, other things. Please do look for that one and let us know. And if you're liking it, please leave a 5-star review, as they say. But do that in a couple days. After I want to make sure that we get this one rolled out properly, and we will have news on the iOS one as well coming up very shortly. Other things, though, please hit like and subscribe to the podcast. At least this thing you're watching right now. If we've been at least a little bit either interesting, amusing, or useful to you, or if we've just killed that hour in your day where nothing else was going on, well, we're happy to have been here with you. Anyway, and then don't forget we have forums to suggest new topics for these live streams, as well as links to all sorts of cool stuff, including the cover catalog. Check that out, forums.comicbase.com. As for that, I'm kind of talked out, so I'm going to let y'all go. I'm Pete Bickford, and I will see you all on the next one. Bye-bye.